Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. This morning I was out watering my trees and I went to water the one Thuja over here and it wasn't there on the bench. So right in here is where my Thuja was and it was missing, so I looked on the ground down here and sure enough the tree and the smash pot were on the ground. It's very rare for this to happen, but there are a lot of animals that are out here at night. There's raccoons, there's squirrels, I got the cats now, so you never know who's crawling around on the benches. So it's something to keep in mind for the future, is that maybe I will have to start tying my pots down to the benches or something like that. It's only happened twice in the last kind of 30 years, so it's not a common occurrence, but it is annoying to lose, you know, a pot, and if it was a hot summer dry day you could lose the tree too. Here is the tree, which looks in good shape, the smash pot, and I picked out a new pot for it. So I'm going to begin today's video with an emergency repot, and I won't be doing any root pruning. It's not the right time of the year, so I'll just be slip potting it into a new pot. This Thuja is the one I bought from Connor when he was clearing out some of his trees. So it grew really well this summer, and you can see the mat of roots in the pot. So it did really well. The foliage looks good and healthy, nice strong growth. There's a look at the remains of the pot. Yeah, not much left of that one. I'll cut some drainage screens for the new pot. I'll put a slight layer of soil on the bottom of the pot and then position the tree on top. Okay, so in goes my base layer of soil, and it won't be too much because this pot is about the same depth as the one it came out of. And I think the bottom of the root base here is flat. There's still some drainage screens in here, but that'll be okay. Get that insect out of there. And I'll position the tree in the pot now. Now, I do have the option of rotating it slightly, but I think for now, I'll put it in exactly the way it was, and in spring I will be doing a proper repot, sorting the root base out. Okay, so I just need to fill in the corners with some fresh soil, and that will be that. Okay, so I'll begin adding the soil into the corners here. There's a few fine root hairs sticking up here. I'll just prune away. They were growing up into the moss, which all fell off when the tree went off the bench. Yeah, I think that's quite secure in there. I'll give it a water and then maybe I'll top up the soil just a little bit, but probably I don't need to. I think that'll be fine actually. Got enough soil around here, I can just add a bit more on. I'll probably, in spring root prune it, and I'll probably put it back in the same pot. It's a pretty good pot for it. It's a nice size. It's a step up from the smaller one, the oval one that broke. Now that's what I like to do with my bonsai, is to, gradually pot them up into bigger and bigger pots as the tree grows larger. Okay, I'll clean up and then we'll begin the top pruning of the tree. Here's a look at the tree now. Looks very nice. I think it looks better in this rectangular pot than it did in the oval. So I'm going to begin the pruning now. I'm just picking out some branches that died off, just some little shoots. So one thing about this tree is that it comes forward a lot, which isn't the greatest. And, I can tilt it back a little bit, but the root base is quite set in this position. If I tilt it back, then all the roots behind go too deep into the soil, and the ones at the front will stick up too much. So I think I've tilted it back as far as I can with the current root system. So this tree, you can see the old bark on it. It's very flaky, mature, craggly. But on these cedars, all this rough bark peels off, and you can see it's just hanging on. It peels off all by itself, just from the weather and as it grows. So I think, you know, you can see it's peeled off on the bottom, even though I haven't touched that part. It just comes off, like there's another big plate coming off there. So eventually this trunk will be quite smooth as it sheds this old bark. So the charm of this tree, you know, is that nice root base, the nice flared roots at the base here, and kind of the movement and character of the trunk. So you have to imagine, you know, all this loose bark will be off someday. Well, even maybe today, it's just coming off with my hands. I might as well take it off because insects can hide under that bark, and it's going to come off anyway. There's no point hanging on to something that's very temporary. And I hope someday to have a cedar that has the bark of a mature cedar, the sort of fine, smooth, striped bark. It's something you don't see a lot of in bonsai, is cedars with kind of a mature bark on them. Okay, so I've got most of the rough bark off now. So it's time to start pruning it up. So I generally, you know, prune all the new growth back as far as I can to make the tree more compact. The only reason I wouldn't prune a branch is if I want it to thicken up and elongate. So I'm just looking for that, if there's any branches that I wouldn't touch. So maybe this apex one here could be left alone so it thickens up. It does come forward, so maybe that's a disadvantage. My apex would be even more forward. So I don't know if there's another branch that could take over as the apex. Probably back in here. There's a good shoot here. So I will prune this one back to a branch that's fanning outwards, so right back to here. That changes the tree quite a bit. There's one growing on the inside crossing the trunk line. I'll take that out. There's another one here crossing the trunk line. Take that out. And I can definitely shorten this one. Shorten this one back. And then you have to think about, well, what kind of crown do I want? Do I want a conical shape or rounded or somewhere in between? There's a branch here. It starts from here. It's a bar branch to the one that fans out to the right. And it kind of is just laying on top of the trunk. And it's kind of nice because it gives some foliage in here to balance the slant of the tree. But it's a branch, you have to imagine that thickening up. And is that, do I want that branch there, or do I want to develop another one in its place that's coming off the trunk line better? Good question. I left it on last time. Is that a valid branch is the question. Not really. It runs, if you look under here, it's running parallel to the trunk here, and it would look funny if it thickened up. You get this sort of hole here, thick branch here, the trunk here. So I think I'm going to take it right off. I don't see any foliage back on it, so yeah, it's going to come right off. Here I go. And it might kind of upset the balance of the tree a bit, but it would just become a bigger problem in the future if I left it on. And sometimes when you get rid of this flaky bark, you substitute, you know, the character of the bark with kind of the muscular, you see the vascular lines of the trunk, and that can look very good too. So here on the apex, I've got it splitting or dividing. I've got you know, the trunk line comes up here quite far to the right hand side, and then I have a sort of a vertical branch here. And do I want to keep both is the question. This one is very vertical. I'm going to take this shoot off on the inside here. It's very vertical, so I think if I kept this, maybe I would have to shorten it and redirect it so it doesn't have this tall straight section to it, because the trunk is quite flowing. Tis a dilemma. So I think I'm going to have to sit down and look at the tree, study it, and come up with a plan of action. See what I'm going to do in this area. Whether I'm going to get rid of this, keep it, get rid of this. Who knows? There's a lot of possibilities. So let me think about it. I'll examine the tree, and then I'll come back and tell you what I've decided and prune the tree. I've been studying the tree. So the tree comes up and it goes, you know, over to the right hand side. Sort of a windblown style tree. And I think that's a good style for the tree, is to have everything blowing with the wind. You know, not completely bare on this side, but everything on this side short, everything on this side longer. I've got some good trailing branches at the back here. I've got a good trailing branch here, here. So everything's kind of set up for that style. So I've, you know, been thinking about this trunk line here. You can see it comes out the front quite a bit, which kind of pushes. I think, you know, here's where the base of the tree is, and it's getting pretty far slanting forward. So I'm thinking of removing this whole branch here. Now, part of the problem with removing that branch is this foliage that's hanging down disguises this junction here. It had kind of an apex here that I cut off. And my goal was to try and get this quite flowing, so I could carve this back and I may get, you know, a deadwood strip. I have a branch I removed here that's healed. So yeah, it wouldn't hurt to have a deadwood strip down there if part of the trunk dies back from carving that back, but I think it would make this bend here a little more flowing, and I think it's, you know, what it needs. In the front view you can see it. There's a bulge there where it sticks up, so that would have to be carved back. And you know, by removing this branch, I'll probably get a deadwood strip going down the trunk. So I think it could work quite well. I don't really see another solution. I mean, I could keep it the way it is, but this branch is just too tall and vertical and straight. It's just, it adds a canopy here, but it doesn't do much for the basic core styling of the tree, which I think should be a windswept, influenced by the wind. So the next question is, do I cut this flush or leave, you know, some deadwood gin? I think because the trunk comes up, it's kind of on the inside of a curve here. I think flush would look better. And then I can peel back the trunk a bit. So here I go. This is a big step. So let's get that removed. I'll cut it off with the ratcheting pruners first. Get it as flush as I can, and then I'll do a bit of cleanup work. So here I go, big cut coming up. Click, click, it's done. Oh. So there's what I'm left with. It definitely has a more windswept look now. So now I'm going to do some cleanup work on that stump. So I will start with the one I just removed. I'll make it a little more concave. So I think that one will heal over quite well. I don't think the trunk will die back actually, but this one needs work. So I've been working on this slowly. I didn't want to do it all at once. So I'm going to carve it back to living tissue, and then I'll try and make it look natural, so it doesn't look like I just pruned it off with tools. And I didn't want to leave, any deadwood sticking out because it would interrupt the flow of the trunk. I thought about it, but so you can see it's much more flush now and it looks better from the front, but I'm not done because it doesn't look natural. Okay, I'm getting into some living tissue now. That whole stump on the top was dead, which I expected it to be. How is that looking? It's looking pretty good actually. It may just, eventually heal over this and just sort of look natural all by itself someday. Yeah, that's a pretty smooth transition now. So I think I'll leave it like that and I'll see what happens. If part of the trunk dies back, well, then that'll become evident as the live veins swell, and then I can peel it back to deadwood, that part. But I think it'll look pretty good the way it is. Just peeling some dead bark back here. Yeah, I'll show you a close-up of that. So here is where I did the carving. So you can see it's pretty flush. I think as it builds a collar, it'll look quite natural in the future. Just look like a branch died off. And I'm sure I'll get some deadwood in this area. But we'll deal with that in the future and it'll become a feature. So let's look at the front of the tree now. So there is a look at the front of the tree. Very interesting. So I'll begin pruning it up. So everything, the wind's blowing this way, everything on this side is going to be short. That one could come right off. This one can be reduced back. This branch here is coming off at the base of this branch and it's growing vertical, and then it kind of flops down, so that's got to come off. And there's a branch that comes from out the back here that was kind of growing across. It's kind of a bit of a hanging branch and it hangs down too far, especially if I'm making this wind blow. So the vertical part hanging down I'm going to remove. Like that. Here I've got triple branch. I've got a thick one here that doesn't have much growing on it, which can be pruned away. So I'll start with that. I don't think there's much coming off it except for this little tuft which didn't grow. So it's coming off. That one. I had a little tuft at the back too. Right above that branch there's two little tufts growing vertically. I'll get rid of those. I'm continuing to work on the tree now. I went for lunch and now I'm back at it. So the tree, my initial thoughts are it's looking pretty sparse and bare. And sometimes you have to do that with a tree, is kind of strip it down to the good branches and then start developing it once again and building up the structure and the vigor. So I think after today it'll look quite sparse and maybe not very attractive, but it's a long-term goal to develop this tree into something really nice. So I'll continue with the pruning. I've got to do all this back section, making it windblown. And then we'll see what it looks like at the end of the day. So I'll continue the pruning. So I've got some upright shoots here I can take off. I want to keep this back branch kind of flat and low. Taking that off. Take this one off. Reduce this one back. The tree is really vigorous, which is good. It means it'll do well next year, I think. I'm just reducing all these shoots back, getting some subdivisions. I'll take this back further. Always keeping nice healthy foliage on each branch. I have completed the pruning, so here is how much I took off, which is an incredible amount. Some thick branches. Yeah, a lot of foliage came off today, so here's how sparse the tree is now. So let's look at it from the front and see if I like it or not. Here's a look at the tree from the front. So I changed the front. Here's the former front. So I rotated it so you can see that back branch. So the front will be somewhere about here. And yeah, it's pretty sparse, but I think, I've got all the branches are pretty well in good positions now. So it's a matter of refinement, developing all this branch structure and everything now. I'm quite happy with the design. I think it has a lot of character to it. There's no kind of awkward straight sections. It's all fairly cohesive, the design. A lot of these hanging branches will come off when I get better shoots that are more kind of windswept. Hanging branches don't really suit a windswept design very much. Hanging branches kind of evoke the feeling of a peaceful, calm day where all the branches are relaxed. And more of a windblown tree, the branches would be kind of more horizontal. So yeah, so lots of work to come on the tree, but I think it's off to a good start. I think it's looking quite good. I wasn't expecting to work on this Eastern White Cedar today. I got this tree from Connor when he was downsizing his collection before he moved. So I think the tree is looking good. It's on the right track, I hope. And we'll just see how it develops into the future. So it should be quite exciting following this development of this tree. And that is all for today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone.